Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Closing the First Deal. Today, we have the honor of having Yasmin all the way from DC joining us. So, Jasmine, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this.
Yes, thank you for taking time out of your busy day. We know you have a lot going on. So we'll jump right into it. Like, what inspired your real estate journey?
That's a great question. So, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I come from a family that is very big on construction, real estate, and that sort of thing. And so, it was something that was in the back of my head for a while. Especially during 2020, I started to think like when I saw everybody buying houses in 2020, and then I saw, how much the housing market had happened, everything was happening there. I was like, this would be, I should do it now. So it was always in the back of my head. But then when the pandemic hit, I was like, damn it, like I should have been ready for it right now. I always make a joke like back when the recession happened and like that housing boom. I was like, why was I in middle school when that happened and I wasn't old enough to actually think about it? And then when the pandemic happened, I was like, this is another moment where if I had property, I would have been able to sell it or something. And, it was more so just trying to focus on what it meant to be able to have some passive income and build a lot of generational wealth, being able to have something that I pass on to the younger kids in my family, the next generation. So that's kind of where the idea came from. My family has done stuff like this before, construction background. A lot of them talk about, the ability to either flip something and sell it or hold on to it and being able to always have, a market for it. My uncle always says that there's always going to be renters. So there's never going to be, a place where nobody needs to rent a property. And so a big part of what I wanted to do is to make sure to be able to set myself up by getting a rental property first before anything else. And so that's kind of what pushed the journey.
Oh, that's awesome. So your family have really been cultivating your mind around it since a young age, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it's interesting because not everybody in the family bought houses right away or like bought a house and kept it, but they've always been very big on like you can either buy and flip or you can buy and sell or you can invest with other people or you can, figure out something. And so in my head, it was just always something that I heard so much about and wanted to make sure that I did it when the time was right.
The time finally came. So that's what's up. Congratulations. So
Yeah.
are you comfortable with sharing your financial approach with buying your first purchase?
Yeah, so I admittedly took a very aggressive approach to buying. So I had a little bit of money saved up. I used to work internationally, which really allowed me to save a lot of money during that time, because my living expenses were super low. And so I would, what I would usually be contributing to live somewhere else, all of that money just went straight to like the savings account, just to the house buying account. When I moved back to the US, it was similar where I was able to still kind of make enough money I was continuing able to do that and save a couple $1,000s every month just for the purpose of buying a house. I had reached out and looked into different methods of, buying house, whether it's first time home buyer, or I even looked into NACA and I decided that those weren't like NACA wasn't a great fit for me. Let me see him. Wait, let me see him. Bring him on. Okay, sorry. I'm a
Oh, it's
professional.
fine. He came up. He was like, "Mom, I'm hungry." I'm like, "I just fed you."
Like, and I listen, he knows my voice. That's my friend. Hi. Hi. He's like, okay. He's hungry. So I took a very aggressive approach to saving for it. So I knew that number one, I had looked at some of the different programs and they have like some suggested ways of saving, like NACA one. I didn't end up using NACA because it just wasn't going to fit for my income and then also where I wanted to buy and it just wasn't a good fit. But they had a really interesting, I think, approach to how they advise people to save. And so what they would do is they advise everybody to save what they call the shock payment. So basically what it would be for you to buy your house at least for 6 months to a year, just save that and like what your mortgage would be on top of your other living expenses. And so I thought that was really interesting. I knew that I wanted to do a multifamily. And so my shock, quote unquote, shock payment would be pretty high. And so I challenged myself for about a year and a half or almost 2 years to just save what it would be every month, what I would be paying in my mortgage for the multi-unit. And then I obviously had to pay my rent. And so I had a very aggressive approach to it. And so I literally just saved what my mortgage would be every year. I mean, every month. I did it for a really long time. So that was really helpful in terms of like having a down payment. I had already had some money for a down payment, but then extra money. And then also just prepared me for kind of the shock of going into having to pay a mortgage. I had to do, construction on my home. And so I knew that I would have to be carrying the mortgage for a while anyway. And so it was just a kind of approach that I decided would be most beneficial so that I would be used to, budgeting in that same way. Say, like, if something happened or if somebody were to rent from me, I could still do it on my own. So very aggressive is how I would define it. Your face is like, what?
I think that's amazing because I feel like a lot of people don't try that. Like, I feel like so many people would be so well off if they took that approach. So that way they wouldn't have to deal with like the foreclosures being so high up. So I feel like you were really smart in like what you did and how you strategize. Like, that's amazing. Like, more people
You
need
know?
to do that. You know what I mean?
I admit it's a very aggressive approach, especially because like my rent has never been super. I've been blessed to have really great rent, like where I lived and
Mhm.
everything. So it was a shock. Like, I went from paying like 15, 1600, and just that's my rent. I was like, well, I'm going to pay that. And then what my mortgage will be if I don't have tenants. So whatever
Yeah.
that, yeah, I'm going to save it. So we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. And so it made me adjust the way that my budget was functioning. Right. And so if I'm like, I have to save, $6,000 a month, how can I do that in an aggressive way? So it's a very aggressive like approach, but I think it was really helpful just in terms of what you said, like you wouldn't have to face foreclosure. I know that if I never have tenants, I can still do it on my own. And even just the mindset and the attitude attached to it, it completely made me shift in how I think about money and how I save my money and how I move forward with my money. And then it also meant that I could do the down payment. I didn't have to use any of the programs, but then, I'm buying my next one already. And so I have that money for the first time. And then also continuing that behavior has been helpful.
That's awesome. So did you have to adjust your living lifestyle, like going out? Did you go out? Did you like, what did you do? Like, how did you survive those 2 years? Or was it just because you were so excited to buy the home, you were like, you know what, I got this, like, forget it.
So and I think we have some mutual friends who will tell you, I'm a budget queen. I love to budget and my budget has always been super, super low. And so
Mhm.
I did have adjustments in terms of where the buckets went and where the stuff like the money was going. Obviously, the majority of the money was shifting towards the house. Um, but in terms of like how much money, like a little bit, I was going not maxing my 401k. I was like just below like 80%. And then I went back to being able to max it out. I was able to, I bought my car outright and I wanted to really buy a Tesla, but I was like, I can't buy a Tesla outright, but I can buy, this other car for like off the lot. I can buy it outright. I didn't want to have an extra payment. So those kind of things I had to adjust for in terms of like what I wanted to do. I was like, I can only take 2 trips a year rather than like I can do one in the summer and one in the winter rather than, I love to travel. I come from like my job before was an international, like I used to do diplomacy and work at the State Department, all these things. And so for me, I was like, traveling is so fun. Whenever I'm up and ready, I would get up
Yeah.
and go. And so that was a big adjustment. I think because I started this during COVID, that was helpful because there was no place that I could really go and do anything. And so by the time it was over and I could travel, I had adjusted the thought process a little bit more. But I think that was like the biggest adjustment is like being able to be like, okay, I can't go on all the trips that I want. I can't, do every single thing that I want. But it was more about adjusting to put the things that are most important to me at the front and like forgetting about the rest. And so I'm not like I buy really nice purses, like bags are my thing, but that's it. And I
Okay.
only do that like once a year or twice a year when I go international. Like I'll buy them in Europe. I don't buy them in the US, right? And so it coincides with that. So just more budgeting around that. But I'm not like a shoe person. I don't really spend a lot of money going out. I don't really do gifts. I give out a lot of gifts for family and friends and stuff like that, but not so much like I live a very simple life. And so it was more of an adjustment in terms of my travel. And then like my 1 year splurge was an adjustment. But I just knew it was worth it because I'm like, you work really hard and you suffer, like not suffer, but you budget for a couple of years and then in 2 years you're done. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's nothing is forever. And so that kind of helped a lot.
Doable.
Yeah.
Yes.
So walk us through the process where you just am I muted? Walk us through the process where you decided to like pivot in your life and actually focus on purchasing real estate. I actually want to go back a bit further and ask like what were the discussions like with your family while you were growing up? And is this something that you guys focused on in terms of legacy building?
Yeah, so I would say my uncle is probably the person who, for me, was most influential and had the most conversations, like my parents too, but my uncle, he is a construction guy. He owns properties in Connecticut. And when we were growing up, he lived in like a family home that was passed down. And he would always talk about like the importance of doing that. And he's like, we can afford to, live in a bigger house and we are going to, but we want to make sure that all the things align before we do that. And so keeping like still holding on to these family homes that we had passed down in the family so that the next person who needs to move into it, you can move into it for a couple of years, save your money, and then buy something else. And then you pass it to the next person, you pass it to the next person. You never really sell or get rid of it. And if nobody needs it, then you rent it. And so my uncle in Connecticut, he has had these houses, and my family as well, where they rent the houses because now everybody has their own thing and they don't necessarily need it. But people in our community, like there was a house fire with one of the old family friends, and when they got in house fire, they didn't know where they were going to live. Their insurance was being funny. My uncle was able to offer them this house for them to live in and pay rent, but at a really low rate. And it's a way of giving back to this community, but also as our family needs it, whoever needs it, you can go there, and like holding on to this generational wealth and holding on to this asset rather than selling it. Because you could sell it. And he's like, you could sell it. We make a lot of money, or you can hold it, and you can hold it and you can do what you need, and it can help people as they need to go forward. And so that was kind of a big conversation that we used to have a lot. My mom often talked about how she wishes she would have done more and wishes she would have been able to buy more houses. My mom has I'm one of like I have a lot of siblings. There's like 8 of us, and so they're like, we wish we could have had done a little bit more and had resources to do some of those things. And so it's a little bit different. What's my age or what's the
No,
what
at
age?
what age did the discussion start? You
I
have
would say
8?
really young, probably like 10 or younger. We've always kind of talked about it, and I would say that I remember just growing up and like hearing about like the importance of having something to hold on to and the importance of, building generational wealth and understanding that your house can be necessarily not always, but you can use it and pull equity out of it. You can use it as collateral. You can use it for other things you want to do, and how important it is to be an entrepreneur. So I've mentioned my family a lot, and I come from a family of entrepreneurs, not everybody. But having something and owning something being kind of like the paramount of all of that has always been really important.
That is so dope, like on so many levels, like to have a house where you could just, it's already paid off. So even if they didn't have enough money to pay for it a month, let's say they only had $100, it's like that wouldn't necessarily hurt you. And it was still probably maybe depending on where it was, look, covered like the taxes for the year.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. That's close. Like,
Yeah,
what?
it's cool. I will even say that even in college, one of my best friends, her name is Bria, her mom, God rest her, coolest lady you ever met in your life. Like Margot, shout out to Margot, just super, super cool woman. And she had these brownstones in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, before anybody wanted to live in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, like where the Atlantic Barclay Center, like the Barclay Center is down in the Atlantic, you can look out their door. And if you tilt your head, you will see the center. They got these houses back when nobody wanted to live there and invested in them. And now they're able to charge so much money for them. She left and she passed away when we were just out of college. So we were pretty young, and she passed them on to her children. And that has allowed the 4 of them to really set up their lives and be able to collect rent, but also have some place that they can always land and they can always live. And when we were younger, one of the things that she would say is not all debt is bad debt. And so she would be like, people get scared of hearing about a mortgage because they're going to have this huge debt. But if you have tenants and you can afford to pay your mortgage, even if you don't have tenants, that's not bad debt to have. It's not bad something to have. Obviously, it's better if you can pay it off, right? And eventually you will. But there are ways to, establish yourself. And so when you go downtown Brooklyn now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Brooklyn, but I used to live there for many, many years. It's the place to be. Like you can rent a 1-bedroom apartment for like $4,000 over there. And she has all these apartments. So they did sell one of the brownstones. They share a wall, and they did sell one of them. But they maintain the others because the idea is to rent them and to be able to generate income. And we've talked about it. And I think having friends where you can have these conversations and really understand what the investments are looking at, what the money looks like, what are all that stuff. It's really important. Like I always tell people I'm very conservative, and I don't necessarily always talk about my money, but I will talk about it if it's going to be for a productive conversation for somebody else to be able to follow what I've done, or, ask me questions. If you're like, well, how much do you make? I'm always like, why do you want to know? But if you're like, I'm negotiating, I'm like, here's what I started with, girl, here's where I'm at now, and even for housing, like, here's what I offered, here's what was accepted, here's how you move. Because I think having those open conversations really helps, especially Black people, to understand what it is, what's the market and what to expect and kind of what makes the most sense. So I'm really grateful to the Lewis family, to Margot, to Aunt Margot, and also to Bria, because we've had so many conversations about it and really been able to understand, like, here's when you invest when you're young, and here's how it'll pay off when you're older.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I think that's so important. And I think it's one of the reasons why we started the podcast is because we feel like there's so many people in our circles that do invest in real estate and they are doing it. But I also have a lot of friends that are afraid of real estate and are hesitant to even try it, or they feel like they can't afford it. So I was like, the podcast would be a cool way to showcase people
Yeah.
from all walks of life, all types of backgrounds, from being servers to really other jobs and stuff like that, showing casing that they were able to do real estate. So I agree with you, like having those conversations are important when it's uplifting the community.
Definitely.
So
So yeah, go Gavin.
So coming fresh out of college, did it take you a number of years to decide to jump into real estate? It seems like these discussions not only took place when you were growing up, but it must have been really refreshing to make friends with someone who also had real estate in their family and were benefiting from generational wealth and legacy building. Um, so what was it like once you graduated college? How did you decide on which market you were going to invest in? Walk us through that.
So that's a great question because I get this question a lot, like, why'd you wait so long? And so I've talked about my background in terms of work. When I tell you I was a little bit of a nomad, I graduated college and I went to grad school and then I went abroad. And so before graduating, obviously, I grew up in Connecticut, but then I went to New York, went to school in New York, lived there for a hot second, and then moved to North Africa and worked there. And then I moved to different places in the Middle East and I worked there. And then I moved to, South America. And then I moved back to the Middle East. So I was bouncing around a little bit. And then moved back to Brooklyn for a while. And then during the pandemic, I decided, well, and then I've also lived in a lot of states. Like I'm kind of I was a little bit of a nomad. And so figuring out where I wanted to invest, I had to figure out where I like to be first. Like that was a big thing for me because I knew that I wanted to settle somewhere that was not quiet Connecticut, but was not necessarily wild New York. Love New York. I always say it's probably my favorite place in the world, but I didn't want to live there forever. And I didn't want to necessarily buy property there. A lot of the housing laws are a little difficult in New York. So I was like, let's go somewhere a little bit easier maybe and start from there. So I wanted to figure out where I wanted to live. And I have family down here in the DC area. My sisters are down here, some cousins, and I really like it. And so I decided, let me go down, live there for a year. And if I like it for after 1 year, then I will purchase something. And if I don't, then I'll find someplace else that I like better. I thought the DC area was a great place because of the market and how rent goes here. It's consistently like the housing values are always going up in like Northwest DC, which is where I purchased. And it's such a vibrant city. And I thought it would be a great spot for me to kind of settle. And so I came down here. I moved in 2022. Settled like the end of 2022, I believe, settled. So I was here about a year when it came to 2023 and started to look then, and then decided, okay, I think I will definitely stay here. And so I'm going to buy here. And so that kind of process was number one, figuring out where I like to live as an individual, looking at where the market was best, where I could afford to live, and where my money would 10, 15, 20 years from now, exponentially increased. So that's some of the stuff that I thought about. So right out of college, I was more so figuring out where I wanted to be, and letting my career kind of take me wherever. And then when I was ready to more settle down and I got a little bit older, I decided to put some roots.
So you really thought this out, girl. I
Yeah.
love it. Like,
I looked in Brooklyn, I was like, because I just knew I didn't want to be there forever. And so I think even like the wear and tear on apartments in DC is a lot different than the wear and tear on apartments in New York. Some of the housing rules, there are some very complicated ones in DC as well, but I knew that I wanted to look elsewhere. And that's not to say that I'll never buy in New York or never buy anywhere else. But for me, I thought this was a good fit because I really like this city as well.
that's awesome. So like, how did you find your realtor? Was it someone recommended to you, or what was that
She
process like?
She is the best realist. Like her name is Andrea Saunders, Washington. Love her down. I will send you her information if you guys want to link it. I think she is phenomenal, phenomenal. And I always say if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have closed on this deal because I would have been like, forget it. I had a very complicated way of closing this deal. And so she was the most amazing person to work with. I was looking up different real estate people and I was also looking up programs in DC. And so she is a private real estate agent and I worked with her, but she also worked for like some of the programs that they have in DC for like first time home buyers. She worked for NACA. And so I found her name on all of these, and then I met with her, and that's how I met with, like, she does take other clients outside of those programs as well. And I was like, I'm not doing NACA. And she was like, that's fine. I can still be a real estate agent. And so we connected on that, and I hit it off with her right away. Her and her beautiful daughter, Zen, she came, like, Zen, I always say, is her like assistant, but really Zen is selling the houses. Cause when Zen opens up a closet and walks in, you're like, oh yeah, I have to buy this house. So it was a really great experience. We worked together for, it took a really long time to close on this house, but she was really great about showing me different properties, and really being able to tell me, like, going beforehand to be like, you don't even need to see this one. Like, it's not going to be for you, or taking me to where we needed to go. So she was really great.
That's awesome. So how long did it take for you to close?
Oh Lord, almost a year. It was
What?
yeah. So I have a really interesting story about how I got this house. So the house that I was originally in contract for a different house, and I decided I needed to get inspections. And I just was like, I gotta get inspections for everything. I don't want to buy as is, especially for a house that's been vacant for so long. And this original house was vacant for so long. Gas leaks, piping, all of this, like, just everything was wrong with it, right? And so
Mm.
it was bad. We were about 2 days from when I could not get my earnest money deposit back. And they were like, this house would never pass inspection. Like, you're going to have to rip everything out and start again. And it's really, it was going to be really tough. And so we were about 2 days from when I would lose my earnest money deposit. And Andrea was like, I think if I were, she was like, I'm going to give you my advice. I can't tell you what to do, but I think that we should keep looking. I would be okay with keeping looking. So I was like, okay, bet. So we pulled the money, and we decided not to go forward with that deal. Maybe 2 days later, maybe even 2 days later, she got a call from somebody saying, like, hey, like, another real estate agent was like, hey, I know you're looking. I know your client's looking. I have a house that's not even on the market yet. Do you want to see it? And so we were like, yeah, definitely want to see it. So we went over, and it was this amazing couple. I won't say their name because they're very private people. This amazing, amazing couple who are in their 90s. They have no children. They wanted to sell their house, but they didn't want to put it on the market. They didn't want to sell it to anybody who would knock it down. Because in DC, people are big for, you can't necessarily build out, but you can build up. And so a lot of times people will take small 4-unit apartment buildings, knock them down, and make these like huge like things on top of it. And so they really didn't want that to happen to their house. They'd paid it off 1 billion years ago, and they wanted somebody who would live in the community, who would live in maybe one of the units. They really wanted a woman of color, but they were like, we're not going to discriminate. So obviously we'll sell to anybody. But the wife who had bought it, she bought it when she was very, very young, and she bought it on her own. And she was like, I want to keep that going. And so they were just this amazing couple. And so they said to come and see it. They hadn't gotten it appraised or anything. They were just like, tell us what you can offer. So I made them an offer, and they were like, okay, we'll accept it. And it was amazing. I was like, oh, my life is so great. This is perfect.
That's awesome.
So they had 4 tenants. The first tenant left, no problem. There's something in DC called TOPA, which means that the residents who are living in the home at the time are supposed to have first of right refusal. And so they get the first chance to buy the house before anybody else. You have to file it with the city. You have to go through this whole process. And then if it's approved, they have to waive their right, saying, we were offered it, we can't do it. And then you can offer it to outsiders. But they didn't put it on the market, so it went a little bit different. So, they accepted my offer. We signed all the papers, everything was good. And we had thought they had done TOPA. They had thought they had done TOPA. It wasn't done correctly. And so then this whole process started where they had to go to all the tenants and say, hey, we're selling the house. They had to go through the TOPA process. And so something else that's big in DC is called cash for keys, where you say to a tenant, hey, do you want to buy the house? They're like, no. And they're like, okay, well, I'll offer you this much money. You take the money. We sign the agreement saying that you got the offer to buy it. You don't want to offer this, buy it, and you vacate right away. DC does that a lot. Usually people take it. It's not a big deal. Sometimes they negotiate. The only reason they really do it is because with TOPA, you have 90 days to say, yes, I want to, you have to alert them. They get the first 30 days to get their notice, then the 60 days to say if they're going to buy it. If they say, I'm going to buy it, they then have 90 days to produce, it's 30 days to produce documents that they can afford it. And then after that, then they get another 30 days for this and another 30 days for that and another 30 days for this. And so the whole process can be very, very long because you have to follow the court process. So they offered the money to different people. Most of the tenants, honestly, the first 3 were pretty easy. They left with no problem. They were like, sure, we can't afford to buy this house from you guys. thank you for the cash. One of them was like, oh, you don't even need to give me cash. Like, you did so much for us over the years, because these are people who, when I tell you, this couple is, they never changed the rent for any tenants they ever had. These people were in there for 30 years, 20 years, 15 years. The person who was there for the least amount of time was there for like 11. And so they never raised their rent. They left these rents very, very under market. They really wanted to help their community. And so most of them easily said, we understand, we'll sign the papers, we'll leave. Or they said, okay, we'll take, whatever, a couple thousand or 5,000, whatever it was, and we'll leave. We had one tenant who was like, no. So she fought tooth and nail. It was crazy. So she was like, she did the whole process of, I want to buy the house, and then, but never had the funding. She just was making it difficult, because the more you say it, the longer your process, you get
Yeah.
more time to stay in the building. And so she just did that for over and over. She took them to court. It was a fighting. She got continuances. It was the longest process ever. In the end, she was like, maybe like 40 days before her time was going to expire, and there was no more court continuances available. She was like, okay, I'll take 20,000 and I'll leave. And I said to them, I said, I'll wait her out. And they laughed. Everybody thought I was crazy, because when this first started, I said to them, if it's for me, God will make it for me. Like, I told them, I'm like, you don't have to pay anybody to leave. I'll just wait the whole process out. I have a really great, way under market. I'll wait. Like, I have nothing else to do. Like, it's fine. I can wait until it closes. And they're like, we're trying to get them out for you. We're so sorry. And I'm like, you don't have to be sorry. You've done such a beautiful thing for me by letting me buy this house, which is under market and it's already appraised for way more than I paid for it. I'm good with waiting. Don't give any of your money but you're gonna, profit off of this to get them to leave. I'll just wait. So I was like, it's fine. We could just wait it out. So we waited and we waited and we waited and we waited. And she fought, which I understand to an extent, because, she's lived there for a decade and she's like, I don't want to leave. But the other side is they had given them free rent for like a year plus. And so I'm just like, just go. Where's the money that you saved? Like, yeah, go. But it was a very long process of just kind of finishing it out. And at the end, I was a little bit like, this is never going to end. Like, this is never going to end. And I was like, maybe it's not meant for me. And if it was meant for me, God will make it easy. And it's not making it easy. And Andrea was like, no, this is meant for you. If it's worth it, it's meant for you. Leave. Like, you should not give it up. And I was like, well, maybe it's just, I shouldn't be letting these people leave, and I'm displacing them, and all these emotions of maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I should. And I credit Andrea, who was like, we gonna close, girl. We've been doing this for like 9 months, 10 months. We're gonna do it. And so in the end, we were able to close. It was a very long process. It was literally a very, very, very extensive process, just because there's so many laws around when tenants, and I think they have a lot of rights in DC, and I actually agree with them. I think that they should have as many rights as they do, because that's, gentrification happens everywhere, but being able to try to reduce some of the displacements for generations of families who have lived in areas, I think is really important. But it made my process super, super difficult. And so I credit Andrea, and I credit, just her tenacity and being like, anyway, girl, I'll see you on Thursday. We about to close anyway, even though I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, this is done. So it just took a really long time. It was the longest closing that the mortgage company, the title company, and my real estate company had ever seen. But I was like, yeah, well, I don't got nothing else to do. Like, it wasn't hurting me. I don't need some place to live, And in the meantime, like, my rate was like the same. It didn't change. Everything was kind of frozen. And so it was just a waiting game.
So a couple of questions. Following the closing, did you utilize a 203K? I know you mentioned having to do some construction. Did you take the conventional or the FHA route?
So I ended up doing the conventional loan based on my income and all of my credit score, all of that kind of stuff. The FHA and the conventional were not, it was the same thing for me. It really was like a $12 difference or something like that. And so my real estate, like my mortgage lady was like, no, we're going to go conventional, because you can get some of the things that you can get as conventional are different than what you can get FHA. And so she's like, this one is a better fit for you and where you are versus FHA, which I always struggle with it, because I'm like, I want to use the FHA. You can only use it one time in your life, right? And so it's always like, why not use it and get those benefits? But at the end of it, if it's not doing that much for you and it kind of traps you into some of the, you have to do this, you have to do that. She's like, go conventional whenever possible. And so I ended up just doing a regular conventional loan. After closing, I was able to pull a great deal of equity out right away. 30 days after, so that I could, I put down a pretty penny for it, but then I was also able to, because of what it appraised at, be able to pull some of the money out. That's funding like all of the repairs and the renovations. Yeah.
That is so dope. Like that whole story, I feel like it really was God ordained. And I know
Oh,
you said like you felt like uneasy, like maybe it wasn't for you, but I almost feel like God was testing your faith and to see if
yeah.
you really had waited it out or if you really believed that it was for you. And once you were like, this is for me, it
It
just
just and
happened.
that's what I really think that that's how it happened because I prayed on it and I was like, if it's for me, make it easy for me, and if it's not, take it from my heart, like make me not even want it. And I woke up at ease. Like Andre was like, anyway, girl, we're gonna do this. Like she was ignoring me, but after I prayed on it, I felt completely better, and I was like, this is meant for me. It's easy, and there wasn't really hiccups. Like there were small things here and there with the mortgage company, but like nothing in terms of like actual big things. They were like, oh, we can't close on this day. And then I was on a trip. And like, so little things like that were like, when are you going to get back? And I was like, I'm not back yet. Like stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything big. Everything after that, once the tenant had vacated, and the people who sold me the house are the kindest people, even though after all of that stuff, they were like, here's a little money. They slid her a little money anyway, just so she could get on her feet. And I was like, okay, they're such kind people. So after she vacated and left the keys, they were like, let's close. And I was like, I'm in Italy. And they're like, when you get back. And so I came back, signed, and that was it. And so it really was, I think, even the way that they've come into my life, and they have another house that literally is right next door. And they're like, do you want that one? We won't list it until you're ready. Like, let us know if you want it. And they're just amazing. And so I think that these are really, it's been a great journey so far. And it's been pretty a little bit of rocky in the beginning just with the closing process. But honestly, it ain't really do nothing. All I had to do was sit around. So I'm like,
Yeah.
what's the difference? It's not like, nobody's backing out of the deal. It's just a waiting game. And I'm a really patient woman, so it worked out.
That's awesome. So I guess another question is, um, why not just take the house with the tenants if you didn't need a place to stay? Like, why did you have to like have them move out?
So that's a great question, and this is going to make me look like a little bit of a villain. Um, so I recognized that I had a mortgage to pay, and that the people who sold me the house, I keep almost saying their names, they didn't have a mortgage to pay anymore, right? And so they were renting. Nobody, I think the highest rent of anybody in the building was $1,000.
What for DC? That's crazy.
Yeah, and the lowest I think literally was like 400 or 300. Like just they was chill. And so I think it's beautiful. And at one point the Gaskins when the fight like when they were fighting with the lady and they were like, "Can you just keep her?" And I was like, let me think about it. I considered it, but I thought about how long she had lived there with them and how they had given this, no rent for a while, but even before that, she hadn't really paid her rent very often. And she wasn't the easiest tenant. And she had known these people for over a decade. And so I was thinking about it, and I'm just like, number one, I need to do renovations. And so I would have to move you out and move you back in. And number two, if you're not that great to these really kind people who are not charging you that much money, there ain't no way that you're going to pay me my rent. You don't know me. She wouldn't even let me in to see the unit when they were selling it. Everybody else did. I'm like, I can't because I wanted to start off on a clean slate. And I felt like, number one, you're not going to pay me market value. Absolutely not, because you're paying so far under market value. I could never increase. And I would have had to keep her rent how it was. And then also on top of that, I wanted to be able to go in and renovate. And I also wanted to be able to get market rent so I can live free. I can't let nobody else live free. I got to live free. The rent of the other units covers mine. So I'm like, I can't just be like giving away free. And so I just decided not to. Instead, what the Gaskins and I agreed to is I made them a promise that I will at least have one unit at all times that is lower income and that's less than what the market value is. And so that was and they're like, you don't have to, but we would appreciate it. And so that's what I ended up doing instead.
No, that's
Yasmin,
awesome.
would you like us to edit I know you don't intend on saying their name, but would you like us to edit
If,
it out?
if I say it, please take it out because I
Okay.
don't think they would love to have their, I don't know. They don't use social
I
media,
mean, it might be legacy. It's a great story to tell.
yeah.
But we wanted to make sure that everyone's privacy is protected. So if you'd
Wait,
like us
you
to
didn't
do
say
that.
the name? She didn't say the should she? It went right over
I
my head.
just said it just now when I said this is the deal that we agreed
Uh,
on. I said it.
okay.
I don't think
So
they would be mad, but
I'll edit that part.
how do
Okay.
you how do you intend on using this first deal to leverage some of your other deals or your experience at least? It seems like your experience with discussing real estate with your uncles prepared you for even the close, which was tricky. So it's nice that you were able to navigate that. But what's in your future?
so what's in my future is there's a house right next door that they also own and that I'm gonna have. So I already started that process. The only thing is,
Hey.
again with the tenants, we got to make sure that it's occupied. And it literally is like right next door. And it's occupied. And so we're going through the process of letting them go, and then I'll be able to take possession of that as well. But it's literally the same thing. Contract, everything. We've talked to them. It's good. It's just a matter of the moving out. And so I'm patiently waiting. I'm also not in any rush because renovations are not done until next month. And so I'm like, let me just wait it out a little bit. And then once
Yeah.
we can start the next place. In terms of like being able to leverage this first house, I have not pulled out equity for the next 5 from this house, and I don't intend to. My very aggressive saving patterns. Sorry, there's a fire hydrant going by, a fire engine. My very aggressive saving patterns and habits, I still do it. Like it's just now it's just my life. Like it's just how I do things. And so I've saved enough money now for the next down payment. And so that's what I plan to do. The next one is a little bit more difficult because I'm not going to live in any of the units. And so it's not going in as a residential, it's going in as an investment. And so the terms are a lot different. It's a lot more expensive to acquire than the first one was because it's completely different terms. And so I've been able to leverage it by showing assets with this new house, but I'm not planning to pull any of the equity out of it. Moving forward, what I plan to do is I plan to live in this building for like 2 years, and then by 2026, I want to actually build something. But I want to build a dream house. I want to build a house with a massive kitchen, like a massive kitchen. That is
Checking it up.
yeah, so that's what I want to do next. I'm talking to a couple of friends that live in some other states about what we should be doing together and kind of where there makes sense for us to combine our efforts and do it. I also have a couple of friends like Jessica and Jerome, and they wouldn't mind if I said their names. And they are also into real estate, and they do a lot, and they usually do it in the South. So like Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And I was just visiting with them last weekend or the weekend before. And they're the best. Like they're so awesome, and they do so much in terms of like rental properties and investment properties. And so I'm hoping to maybe one day do something with them. I have some other friends who are also, because a lot of my friends are I try to have friends who are open and have conversations, right? Who want to talk about the things that they're doing. And so starting to think about where we can invest. My friend Bria, like my best friend that I mentioned earlier, she wants to buy a vacation house that we've been talking about. And so after this next property here in DC, that's when I'm going to look outside of DC. But because I plan to live in the DMV area right now, that's kind of what I'm focused on, just these first 2. And then right now, and then after that, potentially a vacation home. And so Bria wants to do like the Hamptons or Sag Harbor or someplace that's real, real fancy and real, real black. It's like Martha's Vineyard, because you can obviously collect so much for, the rentals, but then also it's a beautiful place, and it's also a legacy, someplace where like our culture has been, and we want to keep that and kind of hold on to it. And so we're looking into that as well. So those are kind of the next couple steps for me.
That's awesome. You got it all lined out and plans. I've enjoyed this.
But by any chance, do they have a third or fourth property as well? Or do they just like own all of the buildings on the block? I'm just interested. I'm being nosy.
They've got they've got like 2 more. And they're
You
also
should
like
buy up the whole block, girl.
like whatever Beyonce husband said. Didn't he say something like that? So the idea is, they have one is like a mixed use. It's not on the same block, and then another one is a regular house. And so they're
I'm
like,
really interested in their story, because think about the time period in which
yeah,
she or they accomplished that.
yeah, like this, the next house is completely only in her name as well. And they're just amazing people. Like I'm so grateful for the relationship that I've built with them, because they're like there was a couple people trying. We all was at the house the same day too. Like this house off market, like that doesn't, like that's a great, when you can get it off market, you usually get a better deal.
Yeah.
And so we were all there, and they're like, we like her. And I was like, you like it? They're like, we want to sell it to a nice little girl. I was like, nice, I don't know about nice, but thank you. Happy you think so. And so I plan to, as long as they're willing to sell stuff to me, I plan to buy it. And I think it's important for them. One of the biggest things that they've stressed is really having generational wealth in our community and being able to continue to pass it to Black and brown people, to make sure that we understand. Because in DC, it's really big. People will have, grandma's house, great Aunt Betty's house. and the first developer that offers them, they'll take it, right? And so the wealth leaves the community. And so they're very big on making sure that it stays. And so I want to support that and be a part of that as much as I can.
That's dope. That's dope. I feel like that needs to be the movement around the entire community. Like everyone needs to get on the same page. I don't know if that means we need to go into schools and start having real estate classes in fifth grade, but
Something.
something's
There's
gotta
ways to do
give.
it. There's ways to do it. So it's been a really great time. And I really think it would be great if we had more conversations. And I'll even talk to the couple and be like, do you ever want to talk to them? But they're really older. They have a little bit of, one of them has a little bit of an illness right now. And so they're really, I think, thinking about transitioning out of this area and also selling off what they can and helping the next people. And I think that investment even and then being very conscious of where they want to sell and who they want to sell to. And it's not like they're like, oh, we'll only sell to Black people, or we'll only do this, but understanding like we would like to do this, or even a young person who will stay in the building, who will not, sell it, because developers here, they will buy a low 4 unit. Next thing you know, it's like 8. Like they will figure out a lot of what it is like you can't get, sometimes you can, but you can get permits to go up a lot more than you can get permits to go out. And so if you have, if you can put 4 stories up or 5 stories up, you can get more apartments out of it. And so that's usually what happens around here.
So will you do that in the future?
I actually had I actually, for this 1 unit, I had a conversation with them about, I was like, I want to add a whole new floor to the top. For me, I wanted to build a penthouse. And they were like, sure. Like they're also like, we can't tell you what to do. You bought it. So it was
Yeah.
good. Like they can't hold me to anything. But I don't have any intentions for this building to build up unless I'm putting like an extra floor on for myself. But I don't really think I will, because I don't plan to stay there forever. And so it's not a return on investment. Like nobody's going to, it's unlikely that the money I put into it, I'll be able to get out of a renter. And then when I want to resell it, it's not like it'll increase the value like exponentially where I can then, pull out later on. So I have looked at this other property that I'm trying to convince one of my friends, like, let's do this together. And it's this really cool neighborhood called Brookland here in DC. And they have this little tiny 1-story building. And the developers are Hispanic, and they were telling me how like it's really hard for them to sometimes get projects off the ground, because a lot of the bidding with these big companies, they win, but they won this one. And they're like, we won the rights to the space and we got the permit. So we just need somebody to buy it. And like they will be the builders of record. They own the property and they want to be the builders. But they don't want to like put all their money into it, and they also don't want to live there. And so you wouldn't have to live there, but they're not so much interested in that. And so I have been eyeing this particular one for like maybe 7, 8 months now. And I'm thinking about it. It's beautiful. It's like, it's the actual thing that's there now looks like nothing, but the plans of how the developer, like he has designed it, it is absolutely beautiful. It would be about 6 apartments, with the 6th one being like a penthouse for the owner and like a rooftop deck. And it's just like, oh my God, I really want to do it.
Go for it.
I know I have to be smart about how I do it though, because these first 2 are easy peasy, but that one is a whole new, like it would be a completely different kind of loan. Like it's a construction loan, because we're talking about nothing down there and we're building from the top up. And because it's more than like, if you get to 5 units or more, it becomes commercial. It's no longer residential. And so it's a lot harder to finance, to get the insurance, because I can't go out like, and even if I decided to live there, it wouldn't be a residential loan. Like it wouldn't be like a normal mortgage. It's a commercial real estate loan, because it's 5 units. As soon as you hit 5, you go into commercial versus residential. And then on top of that, it would be building from basically nothing to like establish this building. And so I got to have all my little ducks in a row, give myself a little bit more time, and then go after it. And if it can't be this one, I have the vision already that I want to do it. It's just a matter of when and where.
So I guess for the commercial, won't they use like the projected rents to be able to give you the loan so that you can
They,
acquire it?
they do, even like they do help with that. Even my mortgage for the house, the first house, they looked at the projected rent as a part of like how much I could afford. In the end, they based it off of my income, because I went like the FHA, they were like, we'll base it off of your income. Like, cause I can support it without the projected one. So they're like, okay, we'll give you this loan based off of your income alone. So I still can now go to another one and use the projected from that house to say, hey, and that'll help me pay for this one. But because it becomes commercial, even with the projected, the insurance is a lot harder. The interest rate to buy a commercial is a lot harder. And because it will be construction from nothing, like we would be
Mhm.
building from like zero, it's a different kind of loan, which is a little bit more complicated. I did talk to a real estate agent about it, and she's like, you can do it. Like I can qualify. And she's like, you can do it. But when I looked at the rates and everything, I'm like, I would be spread more thin. And I don't think it's necessarily, I think I want to have a stronger portfolio before I go, or at least have a partner. Because the build price is not crazy. Like to purchase the space and then to actually build, it's still like 1.6 all in, which I
Mm.
don't think is crazy if you're getting 6 apartments and they're all 2 units or more. However, the interest rate on it when I checked was like 13%. And I was like, 13%. So that to me is crazy. I'm like, I got like my interest rate is very low. And so I was like, what the hell? Like I was like, that's crazy. And then also the insurance to carry, like the construction insurance is very, very high. And so it would be looking at a very, very high rate like that I would be paying until we could ever get tenants. And so I'm really looking more so, is there somebody that I can do a partner with to do it? And then also making sure that my portfolio is just a little bit stronger before I go in there. And I also like to have a big chunk of cash. Like I like to go in with a hefty chunk to put down before I do anything.
Why stop at 6 units if you're already in the ballpark of 1.3?
I do not want to be in it. I don't want to own anything super big. Like something about it to me, I think that I can take, and it could just be in my head, but I think the less, like if I have, 10 doors or 13 doors or 14 doors in one building that's not already established, my oversight of it is a little bit more, it's a little bit stretched. And so for me, I'm like, oh, that's too much. Just don't, I don't do all of that. But if I had a partner who's like, oh, I could do it, I'm like, okay. I'm a little bit lazy too. I forgot to tell you guys that I'm a little bit lazy. So
Right.
the thought of like I'm like I'm really literally in the process of interviewing property managers for even the small like 6 doors. I'm like, I need a property manager. I can't do it. I can't possibly. So just that's kind of one of the reasons. And I also I think one of the things that I'm very excited and I am very interested in real estate, but I love my career and that's my career. Like I have a career that I love and that's my focus. I think the more of that I would do, it would come kind of in a different space for me. That would be more of a full time, but I would focus on. And I don't really want to do that yet. Maybe when I'm like a little bit older, a couple more years, I would be interested in it. But right now, I love my career and I love what I do. That I'm like, let me just focus on one thing at a time.
That's fair. That's dope. And you know what you want. So you got this, girl.
What if I want to move to California next year? I'm just joking. I do not, but
I
I
mean, they have the software that will help you out with them putting in the request and then, but yeah, property manager handle all that for you. I agree. I have all property managers for all my properties, so I ain't.
I can't do it. I'm like, no, too many doors, too many people, too much. No, thank you for me. You know.
I hear you. Now, Gavin be the boots on the ground, like he be interacting with, but he has a property manager as well. So, uh,
Can't relate. Don't want to do it. Don't want to do it. Mm-mm.
Yeah, when you have a career, it gets to the point where too many doors takes away from your concentration.
Yeah.
And if you really enjoy what you do, then delegate. There's nothing wrong with delegating. But the way I see it is the more doors you have, the more delegation. Hire an additional property manager. You'll be straight.
Yeah. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. Right now, I'm more like I want to have a big thing is even if I were to build at like 10 units or something like that, I'm still like, I need a good chunk. And when I say good chunk, I'm like 20, 30%. I like to put down 20, 30%. That way I feel just like about it. You know what I mean? And so if I can't do that with this property and then the new one next door, I'm gonna have to wait, refund, and then try again.
okay. So for the next question, because we're almost getting to the close, what does generational wealth mean to you?
So generational wealth. Okay, so I always talk about that. There's two sides of it to me. One of the sides is I don't have any children, but I have a lot of nieces and a lot of nephews. I have 13 nephews and 3 nieces.
What?
I have a lot of siblings.
Literally.
I got so many siblings. Um, And so the way that I think about it is generational wealth is just the knowledge base that I was provided because I do count that as generational wealth. I don't think that I would be where I am without it. And so when I think about where I am, I want to be able to pass down that understanding of finances, of investments, of real estate, of all these things to the next generation. And then the other side of that is to actually have something that they can fall back on. And so I've got all these godchildren, all these nieces, all these nephews. For me, it's really important that the next phase of my life is to be able to pass it to them and to be able to give them something that they can have that doesn't necessarily come with a big burden, right? And so one thing I didn't mention is like the life insurance that I have, the policy that I got is going to pay off the house if something happens to me before they have to pass it to the kids, because I don't want to pass anything on to any of my nephews or my nieces where they then have a burden more than an asset. And so I think even if it does come to them, having the knowledge, the actual asset itself, and then also having the knowledge and the information that I was provided with how to do it, like how to use it for their benefit, how to use it for the next, phase of their life or what they want to do with it. In my lifetime, when I think about generational wealth, because I think people don't talk about like, it's just wealth when it's yourself, but I think about the next phase of my life. And so right now I'm in my 30s. I am 30. I'm turning 31 in December. But 15 years from now, when I want to retire, because I'm going to retire at 45, that my next generation, my next set of life, I want it to be able to be stuff that pays for that, right? And so that I'm providing myself with that, ease of effort, ease of kind of, this passive income and this effort of, all the things I'm putting in now, all this work that I'm putting in now to provide for myself in the near future so that I can relax a little bit and figure out what my next path will be. Maybe it'll be real estate and buying a bunch of doors. I don't know. But more important than that is being able to provide an example and being able to give this information and then also the information, put them on game and then give them a product, right? Give them both things at once and let them go from there. So that's kind of how I like to think about it.
That is beautiful. So with your nieces and just nephews, you mentioned like basically teaching them and giving them the knowledge. So do you like schedule it out, or is it just when you're in passing, you just happen to drop a little nuggets here and there?
It's a little bit of both. So I have a nephew who is he's 20 years old. He actually just turned 21 and he's like, oh my God. And hold on, let me see if I have it. Yep. I have this thing. I don't know if it'll show. This is my calendar. You can't really see it,
No,
but
you can't.
my check-in calendar. So Auntie will check in with you. We will talk about what you got going on in your life. We talk about where your goals are. We talk about, your money. We talk about where you want to be. We talk about all of these different things because I think it's important. I think it's important to have these open and honest. See, it's literally a calendar of my nephew. See, this is his.
What?
On it. This is when we're going to talk. This is what we're going to talk about. Here's what we're working on. And I just think it's important. And so when I went and closed on this house, I brought some of them with me when we went to the first day to see where the construction was happening, brought them with me so they can see, what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And why am I doing this? One of my nephews was like, why didn't you just buy a really big single house? And I'm like, well, what's that going to do for you? So having these conversations and explaining, why you go through it that way. Some of them are really young. So my oldest one is 21. He turned 21 in August. And then the youngest nephew I have, my sister's pregnant now, and then the other youngest is like 2. And so it's kind of different when you teach them different stuff, but put them on game when they're old enough to appreciate it, but also drop little nuggets so that they start to hear it.
That is so dope. Like,
They think I'm the most annoying auntie ever, but it's
nah,
also
I'm about to like take that because I have a cousin that I always check in on, and normally we talk about whatever he wants to talk about, but having that structure, I love this.
talk about nothing, but like one of my nephews, he like this one, I'm gonna be a streamer and he does Twitch. And so even here we have our milestones for your streaming. And what do you think you're gonna be able to accomplish? What did you earn in this month? I earned $250. Like I earned this. Okay, well,
Yeah.
what's next month? It's starting to think about, well, what are you going to do with that money? And how are you going to use that money? And how do you make your money work for you? And so sometimes we talk about, nothing. We talk about a bunch of nothing. But other times having the calendar helps to kind of figure out what we're going to talk about and how useful it'll be for them.
That's awesome. And the final question, what advice would you give your 15-year-old self? Because
Oh,
you're doing great, girl, but what if you had to go back, what would you tell her?
she was a bad bitch. I love that girl. She's really good. I'm real proud of her. If I had to give any advice to my 15-year-old self, it would probably be to continue to be a little bit of a nomad in your 20s, but to be prepared for big pivots. And so like COVID was a big pivot for me. And I think I always look, I'm like, if I could have just bought a house then, their interest rates. And so I probably would have told her to start even a little bit earlier, to kind of get some of these things done a little bit earlier and to be prepared for that moment. But to continue to be steadfast and to do the things that make her happy and to just do what she wants to do. I have another meeting, but I'll tell you guys, like when I was buying this house, my uncles, all of them are in construction. My brothers, I sent this house to one brother, one uncle, and let them know I was doing it. I closed and sent the rest of them. I did it. And my mom was like, "You did it without us seeing it. Nobody checked it." And I was like, because I knew I wanted to do it, right? And I can't have everybody telling me why I shouldn't. I'm going to do what I want to do. And so I'm famous for that. I'm famous for she's going to do her, but I would continue to tell her just to step in that and be 100% comfortable with what she wants to do. Prepare a little bit early, maybe be ready in 2020 to purchase, not 2023. But other than that, I think, yeah, that's probably the only thing that I would tell her to do to move a little quicker, just slightly for those 2% interest rate. Those are great. 4%.
I will say that I did take advantage of the 2%. That was awesome. But I
Yeah,
feel like your 15-year-old self is probably looking at you like you did that, girl. You made us proud.
she's probably a little proud. She's a little proud, but 2% would have been amazing. Like mine is not crazy because I was able to lock it in at such a low rate, but 2%, 2%. Oh my God. 2%. But yeah, other than that, I think she did pretty good.
She sure did. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. For the people watching, I hope y'all took notes because she dropped so many nuggets, like so much knowledge. Just with the family stuff alone, y'all, like y'all need to go back, rewatch it a few times, and you need to take notes, start having those family conversations and just talking to your people, letting them know what you're going on and to see if you guys could collaborate together and change your family history, change your legacy. And with that, have a great day, y'all. Bye.